Yo, what's going on guys? We're back again with another video, and in this video I wanted to discuss the differences in skill gap between PUBG and Fortnite. Now, I'm not trying to fuel a debate on which game is better, as they are both great battle royale games, but they're very different in some of the gameplay mechanics, and I think a lot of people don't understand that, and they will compare them because they both do fall under the genre of battle royale. Now, I mainly play PUBG, but I understand Fortnite, and I've played it a bunch in the past. I respect Fortnite and the monster that it is, and I enjoy playing it from time to time, and I wanted to give my unbiased opinion and my 2 cents on the skill gaps of each game. First off, let's compare the core gameplay, the movement. Now, PUBG obviously has much more variety in this department. You can sprint, you can lean, you can crouch, you can prone, you can jump, you can vault, and you can even walk, which is pretty standard in a lot of shooters, but this is a battle royale game. Now, it has a signature feel similar to Battlefield or COD, but it's just not as fluid. Your character has weight and it moves somewhat realistically, but doesn't necessarily react immediately to your inputs. Your options of outmaneuvering an opponent using the given cover by using your lean, your crouch, your prone, and your jump are basically where the high skill gap can come in. These movements to a new player will feel very foreign. They won't effectively be able to use a lean or a crouch or a jump to get the upper hand on an opponent, and if 2 players go head to head with equal aim skill, the movements can often dictate who will win that battle, as PUBG is a game about always moving and being self-aware. Fortnite seems much more casual in the sense of movement, and you have just a basic crouch and a jump, which good players will constantly use, but new players can also get a good feel for right off the rip. Now, the game being only third person, it allows for great players to take advantage of that camera, whereas a new player won't be able to. Yes, there is a skill gap in the way the camera is used, but it can feel quite cheap and unbalanced, as anyone without third person experience won't know how to utilize that. But we're not talking about balance, are we? We're talking about skill gaps. Now, PUBG of course is also third person, but on a competitive level, first person is primarily used. Now, this makes Fortnite a more casual fun experience and makes it much easier to spot people, and thus allowing many more players to hop in and feel comfortable in combat. PUBG also utilizes a free look button that can be used in either perspective, but when combined in third person play can be really overpowered, especially when your opposition faces certain death because he can't build a fort or create a wall to provide cover. And this leads me to Fortnite's building mechanic, which is where the primary skill gap comes in, and why the third person is a must in that game. Now, if you become very proficient in the building, you can easily outplay a casual player or even someone with good aim. It's equivalent to someone in PUBG who can snap, lean, drop shot, and utilize advanced movements to outplay their opponent. I see many people asking how pro players lean, get such tight angles, and move so well in PUBG, and I also see so many players asking how people like Ninja and TSM Myth build so fast and utilize the high ground and are able to outflank their opponents with the building mechanic. Now, they are both very difficult and they take a lot of practice, but the building aspect in Fortnite is much more complicated and has a higher skill gap alone. The building is what makes Fortnite exciting, and 2 great players duking it out and building on top of each other as they dispense rounds of ammunition until one dies can be really entertaining, but also a bit confusing. So if it came down to the gameplay, PUBG's general and advanced movement has a much higher skill gap, but Fortnite, although his basic movement, compensates for that with complicated building mechanics that allow for creative ways to outplay your opponent that require speed, quick decision making, creativity, and precision in the placement. Now, let's talk about the shooting mechanics next. PUBG tries its best to emulate realism and has projectile shooting, which includes bullet drop and ballistics, and each gun acts differently, and that depends on the ammo type and of course the barrel length. So mastering one gun can take quite a long time as each gun feels and acts differently. You also have to learn the recoil of each weapon and how attachments play a huge part in making the gun more accurate and easier to control. This makes PUBG a game about knowledge and consistency. Choosing scopes and attachments for specific situations and guns comes from experience. This can give a veteran player a huge advantage over someone new to the game, just based off knowledge alone. Shooting accurately over long ranges and learning the ballistics of each weapon takes a lot of time. On the other hand, Fortnite has a very simple bloom-based hit scan shooting mechanic with a few weapons like snipers and crossbows that do have projectiles, but they're relatively easy to learn and aim with. Guns pretty much go where you aim them, and if you crouch, they are much more accurate and reliable, but you'll still deal with the RNG bloom mechanic that can sometimes cause defeat in a gunfight. I know Epic is working on some prototype shooting mechanics to get rid of some of that RNG and the accuracy, and to further balance the gameplay but also increase the skill gap in the shooting mechanics, and I think this will help the game tremendously. When it comes to weapon variety, Fortnite follows the RPG/MMO loot system where the colors define the quality of the weapon. Gray or white is the worst, then there's green, there's blue, there's purple, and yellow, of course, being the best. So ideally you want to grab one of those meta weapons of the highest color and you'll be much more accurate and consistent. Now there's no ADS in third person in Fortnite and the shooting is quite simplified and easy to learn. Now there are no attachments on weapons in Fortnite, only a few have scopes. The great players will of course become legends with the snipers and other projectile weapons, and that's mostly where the skill gap's going to come in. But there's also the high powered shotguns that people jump around and they fire and they look really silly, but this also plays into the skill gap in the shooting mechanics, and it makes you much harder to hit, but also harder to land your shots. So this takes practice. But in my opinion, PUBG has much more complex and difficult shooting and therefore a higher skill gap. Next, let's talk about the map. Both maps are huge, but Fortnite you can easily run around and mostly avoid the circle, allowing for more combat and action and less dying from the circle. PUBG's maps are less vertical without the building mechanic, but they do feature mountains, vast terrain, and one other big addition: vehicles. In PUBG you'll have to learn the vehicles, how to control them so you don't flip and die, as well as know where they spawn. Also what is best for each situation and the terrain, and how resistant they are to gunfire. The thing is though, they're really fun to drive, especially the motorcycle, despite them being buggy and often having the capabilities to kill you. Fortnite really lacks in this, and instead they have launch pads and they allow you to move around the map faster, but they do require a little skill to place properly, efficiently, and utilize effectively, especially in combat. But they're much more simple to use in general than the complex, weird vehicles with strange physics that you find in PUBG. Now I know a jetpack is being introduced and I'm sure that's going to be awesome, but it's only going to really aid in the verticality of the game. I don't think it's going to add in distance traveled as a vehicle would. I could be wrong though, we'll just have to wait and see. Fortnite is just too quick on the updates and I just cannot keep up. Bluehole, you really need to step it up. Now the map seems much larger in PUBG, especially Miramar, and this can be a lot harder to memorize. Now map knowledge is a huge part in both games, but I feel that in PUBG it's a little more important because you just can't build your way out of a situation. You need to know the terrain, you need to know the ridges, the buildings, and so forth, and that's where the skill gap comes in. I also feel that the battle royale and the survival elements play a major part in PUBG due to the map size and the circle compared to the game like Fortnite. In PUBG it's less about combat and more about survival, but in Fortnite you're more than likely always going to find engagements and have to fight your way through to get to that final circle. This is where Fortnite really excels though and has a much more interesting mid-game compared to PUBG. With that being said, there's just different skill sets but still high skill gaps. PUBG also has a lot of long-range battles compared to Fortnite, where shotguns can be used quite often. Both games can be combat focused depending on how you want to play, but the nature of PUBG and its competitiveness will force a majority of players to avoid battle and play smart, which may even cause people to hide in bathrooms. Yes, we know this all too well, and you won't see that much in Fortnite. Next, let's talk about inventory, items, and the variety of loot in the game. Fortnite has a basic button press to pick up and loot quickly, and that replaces whatever's in the slot. Or you can even put away your firearm, pull out your melee weapon, and run over the items and resources that you need for building. You can still tab and rearrange and move weapons around, but it's not complex like PUBG. Fortnite seems much more focused on combat and building than micromanagement and strategy. PUBG's looting in itself has a large skill gap, and being able to land and tab loot quick enough to eliminate that guy going for a weapon and punching you at the same time is crucial. Standing out in the open, looting while moving around so you don't get sniped in the head also takes some practice. To loot fast, use the dragging and the clicking and the managing and looking at your book bag, which can often fill up, takes some real getting used to, as looking down and just picking up an item puts you at a big disadvantage, especially against a good player. Also, you have the armor in PUBG, which is much more complex and requires knowledge. You need to know when you need new armor, and you need to know about the durability stat and how much damage reduction each piece of armor does. Again, it's a game about knowledge and decision making in the looting and micromanagement and the items more so than just engaging in combat. What you're wearing and your camouflage can even have an effect on your opponent's ability to spot you. But PUBG does lack innovation in its variety of items and weapons. Melee weapons are pretty much useless, as most weapons are after the first 10 minutes. Everyone's going to want fully kitted assault rifles, that's just the way it is. Fortnite, you got pulse grenades that allow you to make crazy plays, other grenades that force people to dance, bushes, traps, rocket launchers, grenade launchers, crossbows, and so forth. And it's not that they just have these items, they're actually useful. The weapon meta is pretty much balanced, and it allows for much more choices and variety and creativity in how you want to eliminate your opponent, which equates to a lot of fun across the board, which at the end of the day, we're all playing video games and that's what we're striving to do, have fun. And this is where I want to wrap this up. In my opinion, PUBG is much more complex in many elements, such as the advanced movements, the shooting mechanics, the looting, the knowledge of the weapons, the items, and the map, the vehicles, and I do feel that it can be a little bit more overwhelming and intimidating to a new player compared to Fortnite, which on the surface seems much more casual and appealing to many age groups and skill sets, but that ability to fight and the complex building mechanic at the highest level that brings in that creativity, efficiency, aim, and knowledge, as well as the capability of making those crazy insane plays, can take just as much time to learn as the complex elements in PUBG. So I believe they're on similar levels in terms of skill gap on the highest level. But Fortnite appeals to more people on a casual level, as it's easier to pick up and play, and unless you run into a guy who can really build his ass off and outplay you with a pulse nade, you might be okay having just decent aim. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and this is just my 2 cents on the differences and similarities of skill gap in PUBG versus Fortnite. Like I said, it doesn't mean one game is better than the other, and you can enjoy both of them. Don't listen to the haters. Thanks for sticking around though. I know this was a long ass video, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that like button, and stay tuned for more. Peace.